Hi, everybody. I hope you're enjoying your evening. Today, we are moving beyond the basic terminology of geography to talk about why geography is so important, especially in terms of national power. Now, I'm guessing you've heard of Adam Smith because he is considered the father of free market capitalism, which is still the system that most of the West follows to this day. But his essay, The Wealth of Nations, also theorized that physical geography of a region determines the economic performance of nations in that region. Specifically, coastal regions and those near waterways will outperform landlocked countries. For example, Portugal, the Dutch in the Netherlands. These were small countries, but extremely wealthy and had empires during Smith's era because of their location on those coastal areas. Then, a century later, we see the work of U.S. Admiral Alfred Mahan, who claims that physical geography of a region determines a nation's military performance. And if you look behind the most dominant nations of recent history leading up to that time of Smith, you find the Spanish Armada, the British Royal Navy, and the emerging U.S. fleet to control the Western Hemisphere. These countries were able to build and rely upon these navies because of their geographical access to warm seaports, and most of them were at least peninsulas or islands to some effect. So they could focus on those navies because of their geography for defense. All right. Now let's talk about geographic locations. Listed here are the major lines of latitude, which are strong indicators of climate based on the angle of the sun, but not always determinative. Take, for example, weather in the Colorado Rockies and the landscape there. Is that comparable in many ways to areas of Kentucky and Virginia, which lie at the same exact latitude, but elevation and other factors result in very different climates. That's why we apply varying zones to describe different climates across the globe. Sorry. For now, we'll focus on tropical, desert, climate, highland, and polar. Let's go to the map. So we'll begin with Venezuela here. An example of a tropical country. You can see it follows the rule of the equator, goes right through here. Next, we'll check out Niger, which the entirety of the country is basically within the Saharan desert. You can see here. Looking at the landscape, very arid, lots of sand, very dry, low precipitation there. Next, Germany. You see in this temperate region of Western Europe, lush green landscape, arable land, very fertile, great for growing major crops. Then we have Tibet, very unique landscape. This is called the Tibetan Plateau because you can see raised up by this Himalayan border. And basically, it's at such a high point of elevation, this area is, that it's not affected by the same weather of lower elevations. So that's why you can see this stark divide below the Himalayan coast. And then we call that highlands. And finally, Antarctica, you can see not much going on. This is a polar region, very inhospitable, basically entirely snow-capped. We find those at the North and the South Pole. Today we're focusing on the two major zones in terms of population, temperate regions and tropical. Let's talk about sea trade. So Czechia, like Germany, is in the heart of this temperate region. We call this the heartland, this temperate Eastern Europe area. But unlike countries such as Italy, which is also in this temperate zone, Czechia is landlocked. It doesn't have the same access to seaports or major waterways, which kind of explains for Italy that has had Rome, periods of colonization and dominance in this region of the world, because they have that access to trade and to defense, that having this big long coastline provides them. Czechia we would refer to as a temperate far because of the length from a navigable waterway or a major seaport, while Italy would be referred to as a temperate near. Now let's look at the tropical regions. First, we have the Central African Republic, which we would consider a tropical far region. You can see there. And economic success, it is completely dwarfed by regions like, let's zoom out. Like here we have Singapore. There's only 2% of the nations deemed and defined a wealthy by the World Bank in 2000 are in tropical regions. And they include Singapore, Taiwan right here off the coast of China, and then Hong Kong on the coast. And so you have to consider that, yes, these were all major British colonies. They established a lot better infrastructure in these areas than places in the interior of tropical Africa like the Central Republic. And so that's probably an indicator for why they've had prolonged success since then. But then you have to remember, why were these of such great importance to the colonizers? Why did the British value them so much to really put in and instill them with a cosmopolitan feel with that infrastructure? It's because of their geographic importance on these coastlines that define them as areas of interest for the British. So the overarching idea behind their success is still their geographic location and the benefits that it provided and continues to provide to this day as they develop in the age of technology. A couple more points before we leave the map. Looking at the United States, we have this wide east to west axis going across here in this temperate region. And this allows for the growing of crops when you have that, because in theory, yeah, elevation can mess up at times, but typically if you can grow a crop here at this latitude, then you can grow that crop from there all the way over here. And say wheat, for example, that can really make a difference for sustaining a nation, compared to a place like Chile, which has this north-south axis. If you can grow a crop here, you can only grow it here. You can't grow it up and down typically. So even though they are located in some temperate regions, they have much less area of growing those major cereals that we'll talk about in a moment. Now, going back to the PowerPoint. Temperate near countries like Germany, the US, the UK, they dominate the world in terms of wealth. Despite that these regions only make up 8.4% of inhabited land area and 22.8% of the world population, they produce 52.9% of world GDP. Why, you ask? One, sea trade is more efficient than land and obviously much more old than air, and is by far cheaper than both as well. The temperate climate also allows for them to grow the three major cereals that have nourished the human race throughout history: wheat, maize, and rice. Nourished people equals higher populations, which equals greater military power and industrial capacity. Everything you need for a nation to grow. Also, epidemic diseases like malaria that plague tropical regions are carried by parasites that need to live outside of hosts. The cold winter seasons in these temperate regions prevent them from doing so. So less people are dying, less resources are being diverted to stabilize disease outbreaks. It totally puts a damper on the development and wealth of a country if you have to deal with those constantly. Okay, discussion questions to prepare for class on a separate sheet of paper like we do on most nights. Pause the video here, answer all three with thorough explanations, and then bring them in to use during our class activity tomorrow and turn in at the end of the day. See you in class. Enjoy your evening.